the impact of democratized access to higher education on social mobility. And I have to say that it's a bit of a misnomer. First of all, I'm going to question whether the access to higher education had been democratized in the first place. And secondly, whether it had much of an impact on social mobility, to start with. I should also say that this presentation is to a large extent inspired by the work done by all-party parliamentary group on social mobility. Next term they will be looking into higher education specifically, so I would encourage you to follow their work. So let's have a look at social mobility, and I'm looking here at intergenerational income mobility, comparing parental income levels with that of their kids. And what we find is that the UK is not doing very well at all. There are variations and there are discussions whether it's the worst in the whole world. It has been persistently at the top of most immobile countries. So for instance, you can compare that for the UK, nearly 50% of kids will have their life prospects determined by the income of their parents. In Denmark, this figure is 15. So this is a famous cohort study produced by the LSE Center for Economic Performance in Bristol University. And what it demonstrated is that in fact social mobility is going down rather than up. If you look at people born in 1958, they were more socially mobile than those born in 1970. Interestingly, let's have a look how this compares to the massive expansion in higher education. So here are some figures. In 49-50, 10.4% of young people stayed in education beyond the age of 16. In 2000, this figure was 71.8%. The trend continued, and in the 21st century, nearly 82% of school children stay in education beyond the age of 16. When it comes to looking at the higher education initial participation rate specifically, we see that in England it's now at 45% and in Scotland at 43%. It doesn't mean that all of these people finish university, but they start their studies. And yet, and this is the first point I drew your attention to at the beginning. When we look at the correlation between the expanded access and the social mobility or income, we see that in fact the richest 20% of students still dominates the access to universities. In late 1990s, the proportion changed slightly, and yet you can clearly see from this graph that the richest 20%, almost 40, I think 8% of them tend to go to universities, compared to under 10 of the poorest 20%. This situation is particularly dire when it comes to the top third of selective universities, and here I would like to draw your attention to this. When you look at this figure and compare this to this figure, you will see that when you look at the lowest 20% of income, hardly any students from that group tend to go to the Brussels group universities effectively. And yet, you would think that this fact could be explained in terms of unfair access policies, but it's not. Now, what I have here, I compare lowest 20% of students with highest 20%, but split in terms of their achievement. So when you look at grades triple Bs plus, the differences are perceptible and yet not overwhelming. The problem is that only 3% of the lowest socio-economic group gets triple Bs versus 20% of the highest group. So this is where the problem lies. The problem lies with prior attainment. And once again, we can see something interesting happening here, because when you look at the top universities, Oxbridge and Russell Group, the people from lower socioeconomic groups simply do not apply. And this is a split done by state school plus FE and private sector. You can see how clearly proportion changed to non-Russell Group universities, where the proportion of state school students is much higher in the 90s, whereas for Oxbridge it's 60, 64. And here I should stress that the real problem is in that only 7% of all students go to private schools. So this is, as you can see, 46% out of 7% of all students. And yet, the graphs I just showed demonstrate that it's really not the universities that are causing the greatest harm. And in fact, the APPG on social mobility demonstrated clearly that the harm is done much earlier. In fact, the point of greatest leverage is at 0 to 3 years in primary at home. And these graphs are quite striking when you look at school readiness for lowest 20% comparing to the top 20% at the age of 3. There are huge differences here. Vocabulary at the age of 5, similarly. Hyperactivity, very different. And these differences, in fact, carry on throughout children's life and are a great determinant of their future success at universities. And yes, the big question we have, should the universities be left off the hook? Well, no, not quite. University is the top determinant of later opportunities in life, graduate premium. So graduates can discounted lifetime earnings premium estimated to be over 100,000. Access to jobs. Currently, very many employers look only at graduates for their intake. And most crucially, and I think that this point is interesting, we have to here look at the changing nature of the job market and growing numbers of careers that have become graduatized. And this is the graph that explains what's happening. What we have here is lowest paying third of jobs, highest paying third of jobs in green, and middle paying the ones in red. And these jobs seems to be disappearing pretty much across all of the many countries. And yet when you look at the UK, the situation is quite striking, given that the jobs for the lowest paying third seem not to be growing either. So what is at stake are the jobs of the graduates who might not be able to find any other alternative, any other replacement, given the changes in the job market. And that's why going to university still matters tremendously. What should be done? There are some short-term solutions to create new pathways for social mobility. And this is a pretty controversial proposal that the top 3 students in any individual schools should be guaranteed a place at the leading university. What Les Ebden has been proposing recently is slightly similar. He's proposing lowering access requirements for students from state schools, and yet it's not very clear how that policy is going to be implemented. So at ResPublica, we believe that we just need a more flexible higher education system with many more pathways in order to find ways for those kids who are already underprivileged at the age of 3 to get to university somehow. But also long-term change is needed, and here we want to change the terms of the debate. We need a system where university degree is not the guarantee of future success. And yes, here we are talking about revalidating a vocational education, but we are also looking at a number of other parameters. And the truth is that the path to social mobility cannot be done by education alone. So if we want to address the social mobility problem once and for all, we have to look at the concentrations of assets. And here, the wealthiest half of households hold 90% of the UK's total wealth. The bottom half of society has just 1% of liquid capital. I believe that's a topic for yet another presentation. But I hope that what I have demonstrated quite conclusively here is that although expanded, the access to higher education has not been democratized, and moreover, the impact of this expansion was relatively negligible in terms of social mobility. This said, universities should be held accountable for their admission processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Having said I didn't want to disturb the HEs after coffee, that would have fitted quite well also, because in that short time, Patricia, you've managed to cover a very wide range. You started with the Sure Start agenda, right at the beginning of life, and the predispositions of children in terms of certainly reading age correlations, well-known research. You've looked at the whole issue of school performance and university selection, and you've touched on the benefits of graduateship in what is a changing employment climate. So we need to look at, I think, a number of things. I think a cultural discrepancy in that we're trying to create the volume around a US-style higher education system and implant it into a British UK system, which is intrinsically elitist and hierarchical. So without further ado, lots of controversy there. Any questions for these two speakers prior to our break, and we'll continue this theme, I think, later in the morning. And any questions? Susan?
Susan Hayday. I'm currently doing some work with City and Guilds. I'd be interested in one of your last remarks about vocational education, and in terms of it shouldn't just be about a university degree, because it always seems to me that one of the problems about talking about graduateness and HE is that it is only ever aligned to a university degree. And the other ways of accessing HE and HE qualifications through the workplace are somehow almost discarded. And so I think this access to HE and how an HE qualification is a way to social mobility, it needs to be broadened to more than just, did someone get a degree from a university?
I couldn't agree more, and we need to create many more pathways, look at mature students in great detail. On the whole, I think we need a big change of culture, and here I hate to say, but we should probably look at Germany. It's a question of also prestige. We need to make sure that those with vocational degrees are looked down as second-class citizens. I quite like a remark Janet Wolf made. Janet is responsible for the big review of vocational degrees published in last year. But she said that, well, we still think in the categories when it is like our kids, they go to universities, the other kids don't. And that's a fundamental problem. And I do think that the way to undermine those dichotomies is by enabling mature students, those who are already in employment, to go back to university, and maybe more modular approach to university degrees would also present an answer.
Okay. Sarah, you want to come in this?
Just to say that's exactly what our higher apprenticeship fund is doing, and it's in its early stages, but we are trying to create a parity of esteem, basically, between apprenticeships and academic groups. I think we are getting there ever so slowly, and higher apprenticeships will help. I wish we could do it without higher apprenticeships, that still there was that sort of parity of esteem, but I think the higher apprenticeship fund is already starting to kind of change people's minds, slowly but surely.
And speaking as a prime member of the board of Foundation Degree Forward, I cry why did we abolish that organisation when it was doing exactly that. Philippa, you want to put a question in?
Yes, hello, Philippa from Gingerbread. I've got a question for Sarah, and it is like the no-brainer question. And my question is what's the impact of apprenticeships on people's work progression and earnings afterwards? And could you speak a little bit about that?
I don't have the facts and figures with me, but if you email me, I will get them to you. But it is quite extraordinary, and we use that as a sort of marketing tool to apprentices themselves. We can show them, if they choose a business admin, engineering, accounting, agricultural apprenticeship, what that will do to their wages over time. Sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head, but it is pretty astonishing.
Okay, we have 2 more questions towards the back. First person, please tell us your name and where you're from.
Hello, my name is Russell Davidson. I'm from a law firm based in the north of England called Lupton Forsters. We work with a number of higher educational bodies, but also with a wide range of businesses. I think one of the things that needs to be researched by the universities is the makeup of business mentoring groups in this country. I've worked with a number of them, and one of the remarkable things is that the vast majority of the CEOs and managing directors who are members of business mentoring groups and who've built the biggest businesses have no higher education qualification whatsoever. And there seems to be very little research and very little in the way of working by research bodies to find out who makes up those business mentoring organisations. Some of the biggest businesses and some of the hungriest guys have never been to university, have had no higher education whatsoever. And I think a little bit of research into what motivates those guys and how they manage to get there irrespective of the lack of higher education would do an awful lot of good in terms of formulating policy going forward. There seems to be an assumption that you've finished as far as a career is concerned if you haven't been to university or haven't had an apprenticeship. And if you look at organisations like Vistage, which mentor sort of 16 to 18 people at a time who are running businesses, you will find that the vast majority in each group run multi-million-pound businesses but have no higher education whatsoever. And that needs looking at quite carefully, because we need to reevaluate the relationship between higher education and business in this country.
This is a very, very interesting point, and I agree that probably this fact is not emphasized enough. It's possible to make it to the highest strata of our society without a degree. And yet, if I had to take a guess, those people are probably in their 50s and 60s. No? And the situation is changing quite radically. It's becoming increasingly difficult without contacts to climb up on the career ladder. Apparently, 7 out of 10 people get their jobs through knowing someone in the business. This makes me think that we waste a lot of money on job centers, but maybe I shouldn't have said that. In terms of the need to do research, yes, I agree. But on the other hand, I would like to stress that there was a lot of reverse research done. For instance, John Milburn's review into the professional jobs, so that discovered that 90% of our judges come from private sector. So I think, in principle, I agree, although probably I would like to discuss the details.
Okay, we have another question indicated. Go ahead.
Yes, my name's Pete Scales. I'm from the University of Derby. We use a labelling system, not just in all universities. We talk about traditional students, and then we talk about non-traditional or widening participation students. And these are often regarded as some kind of problem, as though they're remedial or deficient in some way, and that we have to sort of fix them before they can be proper students. Do you think we should stop using these labels?
Okay. This is a hot potato, quickly pass. Okay.
Widening participation, is that the question, whether stigmatizing students from the backgrounds is a good idea? Well, no, and we experienced the backlash of emphasizing distinctions quite recently in the context of Ebden's proposal that students from state schools should be admitted on the ground of achieving lower results than those from the private sector, and it did cause a huge controversy over compromising the standards of meritocracy. So I think we have to make clear that meritocracy is about meeting the same performance standard and making the choice given the total parity of the candidates, to go for the one with a less privileged background. I think labeling is not very helpful in this context, and yet we should probably look into the admission procedures very carefully in order to precisely with time make it clear that the participation is open and meritocratic.
I want to say something a little bit off topic on apprenticeships, but in the United States, where I grew up and went to school and went to university, we have something called need-blind admissions, which you probably all know about. And I think that does go. It doesn't solve, the US is absolutely by no means perfect in terms of participation in higher education. However, in both private schools, in primary and secondary school, and in universities, most universities and schools offer need-blind admissions, which basically means they look at an application based purely on the child's aptitude, perhaps their grades and their achievement, nothing to do with their family background or their financial ability to pay. And that starts in, again, primary and secondary school and goes on to university. It does go a long way to sort of starting to equalize admissions in the US.